My family always called me the good son, but one small mistake at my own birthday forced me to realize a truth about my role in their lives I had ignored for years. I used to believe that if I tried hard enough, I could earn love the way you earn a paycheck. Not the loud kind. Not the messy, emotional kind you see in movies. I am talking about steady approval. A nod. A softened expression. A moment where my parents looked at me and thought, he is enough. My name is Daniel Harper. I am 38 years old now, and most of my life can be summed up in one role, the good son. I learned that role early. I was 7 when I first understood that love in our house came with conditions. I brought home a spelling test with a bright red 100 circled at the top. I remember standing in the kitchen, sunlight coming through the blinds in thin stripes across the counter. My mother was washing dishes. My father was reading the newspaper at the table. I slid the paper toward her like it was a treasure map. She looked at it, nodded once, and said, "That is what we expect." No smile. No hug. Just expectation. Later that night, my younger sister Emma spilled her juice and started crying. My mother rushed to her, crouched down, wiped her face, and called her sweetheart over and over. I stood in the doorway holding my spelling test, still folded in half, and something clicked inside me. Good did not earn celebration. Good was the baseline. Anything less was a problem. So I became good. I kept my room clean without being asked. I did my homework at the dining room table while other kids in the neighborhood rode their bikes until dark. If I felt angry or jealous or hurt, I swallowed it. I did not slam doors. I did not talk back. I did not need much. At least that is what I told myself. When I was 9, my father lost his job for a few months. The house felt tight during that time. Quieter. Tense. Bills stacked on the counter. My mother's voice sharper than usual. I remember hearing them argue late at night through the thin walls. The next morning, I got up early and made my own breakfast. Cereal poured carefully so it would not spill. I even made Emma's toast and set it beside her plate. My mother looked at me like she had just noticed something useful. "Thank you, Danny," she said. "You are such a help." That word stuck with me. Help. It felt better than good. Better than smart. Better than talented. Helpful meant needed. From then on, I paid attention to what made things easier for them. I kept Emma entertained when she got restless. I stayed quiet when my father watched television. I learned to read their moods the way other kids read comic books. If my father came home tired, I kept my distance. If my mother sighed heavily while folding laundry, I stepped in and matched socks. I became easy to rely on. I also became easy to overlook. There was a science fair in 5th grade. I built a model volcano from scratch. Stayed up late layering paper mache, painting it carefully, making sure the red streaks of lava looked real. When I won 2nd place, I scanned the crowd for my parents. They were not there. My mother later told me she had forgotten. Emma had a dance rehearsal that night. "You understand," she said, already distracted. And I did understand. That was the problem. I always understood. I told myself they were busy, stressed, doing their best. If I felt disappointed, that meant I was being selfish. If I wanted more attention, that meant I was needy. I did not want to be needy. I wanted to be chosen. So I adjusted. Again and again. I shaped myself around their needs like water poured into whatever container they handed me. By the time I reached middle school, teachers described me the same way every year. Responsible, mature, independent. They meant it as praise. What they did not see was the quiet calculation behind every decision. The constant question running through my head. What version of me will make things easier for everyone else? At 12, I stopped asking for rides to friends' houses. If they invited me somewhere, I would say I had homework. I did not want to inconvenience anyone. My world shrank down to school, chores, and whatever made me useful. Emma, meanwhile, grew louder, brighter. She had opinions about everything. If she did not like dinner, she said so. If she wanted new shoes, she made a case for it. And somehow, that boldness earned attention. When she got a C on a math test, my parents sat with her for hours, helping her study. When I brought home straight A's, my report card went into a drawer. "That is just Daniel," my father would say. "He does not need help." At first, I wore that like a badge of honor. Later, it started to feel like a sentence. There was a night when I was about 13. I had the flu, high fever, chills so bad my teeth rattled. I remember lying in bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to my ceiling. I could hear laughter from the living room where my parents and Emma were watching a movie. I considered calling out. Instead, I turned over and pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. I told myself, "You are fine. Do not be dramatic." Even sick, I did not want to be a problem. Looking back now, I can see the pattern forming like cracks in concrete. Small at first, barely noticeable, but spreading. I learned that love was tied to performance. Approval came when I achieved something. Affection came when I stayed quiet. Connection came when I did not cause trouble. And if I ever felt empty or unseen, I assumed that meant I needed to try harder, be more patient, more responsible, more selfless. Because surely, if I became good enough, they would look at me differently one day. They would not just rely on me. They would choose me. I did not know then that this belief would follow me far beyond childhood, that it would wrap around my identity so tightly I would not even recognize where I ended and their expectations began. Back then, I just knew one thing. If I kept being the good son, eventually it would pay off. And I was willing to spend my entire life proving it. By the time I reached high school, being the good son was no longer something I tried to be. It was who I was. Teachers trusted me. Neighbors asked me to watch their houses when they were away. My parents introduced me to people as our steady one. They said it with pride, and I held on to that tone like it meant more than it probably did. Steady meant I did not wobble, did not fall apart, did not need. When I was 16, I got my first part-time job at a grocery store. I told myself it was for experience, but really it was because I had overheard my parents arguing about money again. Emma needed braces. The car needed repairs. My father's hours had been cut. I handed my mother my first paycheck without hesitation. She blinked at me like she was surprised, then smiled in a way that made my chest warm. "You do not have to do this," she said, even as she folded the check and slipped it into her purse. But I did have to, because that smile felt like oxygen. From then on, I worked every weekend. I skipped football games. I stopped going to birthday parties. When friends asked why I was always busy, I shrugged and said I liked staying productive. The truth was simpler. If I was useful, I was safe. Emma, meanwhile, struggled in school. She got grounded often, slammed doors, yelled that nobody understood her. My parents poured energy into managing her storms. Family meetings revolved around her behavior, her feelings, her future. I sat at the table quietly, offering solutions when asked. "You are so mature," my father would say. What he meant was, "You do not complicate things." There was one night during my senior year when I almost let myself want something different. I had been accepted into an out-of-state university, a good one. I remember holding the acceptance letter in my hands, heart pounding. I imagined dorm rooms, new faces, a life not built around being helpful. When I showed my parents, they congratulated me, but their excitement felt thin. Tuition was high. The campus was far. Emma was having a rough year. "We would really miss you," my mother said softly. "And things are already stretched." She did not ask me to stay. She did not need to. I nodded and told them I would look at local schools instead. That night, lying in bed, I told myself it was the responsible choice. A good son stays close. A good son does not chase his own dreams when the family needs stability. I swallowed the small, aching voice inside me that wondered what it would feel like to be chosen over convenience. And just like that, I adjusted again. I told everyone I chose the local university because it made financial sense. That was the story. It was clean, responsible, mature. What I did not say out loud was that I had folded the acceptance letter from the out-of-state school and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk, like something fragile and dangerous. I could not risk wanting it too much. College became an extension of home. I commuted from my childhood bedroom. The same pale blue walls, the same glow-in-the-dark stars still faintly clinging to the ceiling. I attended classes during the day and worked evenings at a warehouse to help cover expenses. Most nights, I came home after 10, tired but satisfied in that familiar way. Tired meant productive. Productive meant worthy. Emma struggled her first year of high school. My parents worried constantly. I found myself helping her with homework, driving her to activities, listening to her vent about friends. She rarely thanked me. Sometimes she snapped at me for acting like a parent. I told myself that was normal. Siblings fight. But there was a quiet truth underneath it. I was not her brother. I was backup. One evening, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. They did not know I was home. "I do not know what we would do without Daniel," my mother said. My chest tightened with something close to pride. My father responded, "He is solid. He will always be fine." Always be fine. That sentence followed me back to my room and settled heavy in my stomach. Being fine had become my identity. Not exceptional, not vulnerable, just fine. During my second year of college, I was offered an internship in another state for the summer. It was competitive, impressive, the kind of opportunity professors said could change a career. When I mentioned it at dinner, the table went quiet. That is far, my mother said carefully. Emma had just broken up with her boyfriend. She was devastated. My parents were stretched thin emotionally and financially. I saw it all in an instant. The strain, the unspoken expectation. I withdrew my application the next day. I told my friends I wanted to stay home and save money. The truth was simpler and harder to admit. Somewhere deep inside, I believed that if I kept sacrificing the bigger thing for the closer thing, it would eventually add up. One day they would see how much I gave. One day they would realize I was not just solid. I was indispensable. And maybe, finally, that would feel like love. After college, I did not move out. That part happened gradually, almost by accident. I got a job at a mid-sized accounting firm 20 minutes from home. It was stable, decent pay, health insurance. My father called it a smart move. I told myself I would save for 1 year, maybe 2, build a cushion, then figure out the rest. But life has a way of tightening around the role you already play. My father's back started giving him trouble around that time. Nothing dramatic, just enough pain to make long shifts harder. My mother began hinting about early retirement. Emma switched majors twice and racked up more tuition than expected. I started contributing more. At first it was small, covering the electric bill 1 month, paying for groceries when my mother looked stressed at the register, fixing the washing machine instead of calling someone. Then it became routine. I transferred money into their account every month without being asked. I set it up like another bill. Rent, insurance, family. They never demanded it. They just accepted it. "Are you sure?" my mother would say, already writing the amount down. "You are such a blessing," she told me once. That word again. Useful, helpful, solid. Blessings, I learned, are appreciated but rarely prioritized. Around 25, I finally moved into a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy. Beige walls, thin carpet, a balcony that overlooked a parking lot. I remember standing in the empty living room, keys in my hand, waiting to feel something big. Freedom, pride, relief. What I felt instead was guilt. The first weekend I slept there, my phone rang 3 times before noon. A question about insurance paperwork. A reminder about Emma's car payment. A request to help with a broken cabinet hinge. I drove back without hesitation. Over time, my apartment became more like a storage unit than a home. I was always at my parents' house, fixing something, paying for something, listening to something. I told myself this is what a good son does. Loyalty means showing up. Loyalty means rearranging your schedule when they need you. When I started dating a woman named Claire at 28, she asked me once why I canceled plans so often. "They need me," I said. She tilted her head. "Do they? Or do they just expect you?" I did not like that question, so I stopped dating her. It was easier to adjust my relationships than to question the role I had built my life around. Inside, though, something small had started to ache. A quiet fatigue. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a sense that no matter how much I gave, the distance between us never really closed. They relied on me, but I was not sure they ever really saw me. And I was starting to wonder what would happen if I ever stopped being so dependable. It did not collapse all at once. That is the thing about shaping your whole identity around being needed. The cracks do not show up as explosions. They show up as exhaustion. By my early 30s, I was making good money. I had been promoted twice. I worked long hours, stayed late without complaint, and built a reputation for being dependable. My boss once told me I was the kind of employee every company wanted. Reliable, calm under pressure, never dramatic. It sounded familiar. At home, nothing really changed. Emma moved back in after college when her first job did not work out. Then she left again. Then she came back. Each time, there was some crisis. A breakup, a bad boss, a wrong opportunity. Each time, my parents leaned on me quietly. "Could you help her with first month's rent? Could you co-sign just this once? Could you talk to her? She listens to you." I always could, and I always did. I told myself I was protecting the family, holding it together, being strong so no one else had to be. But there were moments when the weight felt heavier than I wanted to admit. Like the night I came home after a 12-hour workday and found 3 missed calls from my mother. When I called back, She sounded irritated. Where have you been? We needed your help with the insurance forms. I apologized. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because that is what came naturally. Sorry for not being available. Sorry for having my own schedule. Sorry for being human. There was another moment that stuck with me. It was my 33rd birthday. I had taken the day off work for once. I did not plan anything big. Just dinner at my parents' house. Familiar. Easy. Emma arrived late. My father complained about traffic. My mother served a cake she had clearly picked up last minute from the grocery store. The frosting had my name spelled slightly wrong. Daniel with 2 L's. We laughed about it. I told her it was fine. Later that night, as they discussed Emma's new job offer in another city, the conversation shifted fully to her future. The risks, the opportunities, the logistics. No one asked about mine. I sat there, nodding, offering advice, refilling water glasses. At some point, I realized I felt like a guest at my own birthday. Driving home, I gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. A thought kept circling in my head. What if this is it? What if no amount of patience or sacrifice will ever change how they see me? I tried to push it away, told myself I was tired, overthinking, but something inside me had started to wear thin. I was present at every crisis, every decision, every need. And yet, when the room filled with conversation about dreams, fears, hopes for the future, my name rarely entered it. I was the foundation, not the focus. And foundations, I was beginning to understand, are expected to hold everything up without ever asking to be held themselves. The realization did not come with anger. It came with a quiet, creeping emptiness that I could no longer ignore. The defining moment did not happen during a fight. It happened during a normal Tuesday. Emma had decided to move again. Another job, another city, another fresh start. My parents were anxious. There were deposits to cover, furniture to move, logistics to manage. I had already transferred money that morning to help with the security deposit. That evening, we were all sitting at the kitchen table. The same table where I had done homework as a kid. The same table where I had folded my out-of-state acceptance letter into silence. Emma was talking about how exciting this new chapter would be. My mother was teary. My father was offering practical advice. At some point, my mother turned to me and said, "You will help her settle in, right?" It was not a question. I felt something inside me hesitate. For the first time in my life, I did not answer immediately. "I cannot," I said slowly. "I have a big project at work. I cannot take time off right now." The words felt strange in my mouth. Heavy. Foreign. The room shifted. Emma's face tightened. "It is always about work with you." My father frowned. "Family should come first." I tried to explain. I told them I had already helped financially, that I was stretched thin, that I needed to focus on my own responsibilities too. There was a silence I had never heard before. Not the usual distracted kind. This one felt colder. My mother's expression changed in a way that caught me off guard. Not anger. Not sadness. Disappointment. "You used to be so willing," she said quietly. That sentence landed harder than anything else. Used to be. As if I had changed in some negative way. As if wanting boundaries meant becoming selfish. I looked around the table and saw something clearly for the first time. They were not confused by my limits. They were inconvenienced by them. All those years, I believed that if I kept showing up, kept sacrificing, the emotional distance would shrink. That one day we would sit around this table and they would ask about my dreams the way they asked about Emma's. But in that moment, I realized something painful. My effort had never been a bridge. It had been a service. They did not see me as the son who gave everything. They saw me as the son who always would. The conversation moved on without me. Logistics. Dates. Packing lists. I sat there, nodding occasionally, but inside something shifted quietly and permanently. It was not rage. It was clarity. No amount of sacrifice was going to rewrite the role they had assigned me. I could give them every extra dollar, every free weekend, every ounce of emotional energy, and I would still be the dependable one, not the chosen one. Driving home that night, I did not cry. I did not slam the steering wheel. I just felt tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. For the first time, I allowed myself to think a forbidden thought. What if I stopped trying? I did not make a dramatic announcement. There was no speech, no slammed doors, no final argument where I listed every sacrifice like a receipt. I just began pulling back. It started small. When my mother called in the middle of a workday about a minor issue with the cable bill, I let it go to voicemail. I returned the call later that evening instead of stepping out of a meeting. When Emma texted asking if I could review her lease agreement real quick, I told her I would look at it over the weekend, not immediately. Each time I chose myself, even in small ways, I felt a strange mix of guilt and relief. The guilt came fast, sharp and familiar, a voice in my head whispering, "You are being selfish. They count on you." The relief was quieter, but it lingered longer. I started staying at my own apartment more often. I bought furniture that was not secondhand. I painted one wall a deep blue just because I liked it. No one had to approve it. No one even had to see it. It felt almost rebellious. My parents noticed the shift before I acknowledged it out loud. "You have been distant," my mother said one Sunday afternoon. I was sitting across from her in the living room, sunlight catching the dust in the air. The same house, the same couch, but something inside me was different. "I have just been busy," I replied. That used to be enough. This time she pressed, "We hardly see you anymore." I almost laughed at that. For years, they had seen me constantly, just not fully. "I am trying to build my own life," I said carefully. The sentence felt fragile, like it might break in my hands. My father shifted in his chair. "No one is stopping you." But that was not true. They had never chained me down. They had never forbidden me from leaving. The restraint had been quieter than that. It had been expectation, loyalty framed as love, dependability framed as identity. I realized then that the chains had been invisible because I had helped forge them. For weeks after that conversation, the atmosphere felt subtly tense. Not hostile, just strained. Requests still came, but they were laced with something new. Surprise when I said no. Disappointment when I hesitated. I did not fight it. I just kept choosing differently. And with each choice, I felt something inside me loosening. Not breaking. Unraveling. It was not anger driving me. It was exhaustion. A deep, bone-level understanding that I could not spend another decade trying to earn something that was never offered freely. For the first time in my life, I stopped adjusting myself to fit what they needed. And that is when I realized how much of me had been shaped by them in the first place. Without the role of good son, reliable one, steady foundation, who was I? That question scared me more than disappointing them ever had. But it also felt like the beginning of something I had never allowed before. Possibility. The first holiday, I did not rearrange my life for felt unreal. Thanksgiving had always been automatic. I would arrive early, help set the table, carve the turkey, wash dishes before anyone asked. This time, I told my parents I would come for dinner, but could not stay all day. There was a pause on the phone. "Oh," my mother said, trying to sound casual. "All right." When I showed up that afternoon, the house was loud and warm like always. Emma was home for the week, animated and glowing with stories about her new job. My father greeted me with a quick hug, distracted already by something on the television. For the first time, I did not head straight to the kitchen. I sat down. I let someone else carry the plates. It felt unnatural, like I was breaking an unspoken rule. Dinner unfolded the way it always did. Conversations circled around Emma's career, her apartment, her plans. I listened, offered a few comments, but I did not manage the room. I did not refill glasses automatically. I did not monitor the mood. Halfway through the meal, my mother looked at me. "You are quiet," she observed. I almost said, "I am always quiet." Instead, I shrugged. Just listening. Later, when dessert was served, my father asked about work. It was brief, surface level. I answered simply. No one asked about the things I had started doing on my own. The weekend photography class I signed up for. The solo trip I was planning. The fact that I had started seeing a therapist for the first time in my life. Those parts of me did not seem to fit into the version of Daniel they were comfortable with. Driving home that night, I did not feel angry. I felt separate, like I was observing my family instead of orbiting them. A week later, my mother called in tears. A pipe had burst in the basement. Water everywhere. Stress high? Old instincts surged forward immediately. Grab your tools. Leave work. Fix it. Instead, I paused. "I can come by after work," I said calmly. "But you might want to call a professional too." There was confusion on the other end of the line. "You have always handled these things," she replied. Yes, I had. And that was exactly the problem. When I arrived that evening, my father had already called a plumber. Emma was helping move boxes upstairs. The world had not collapsed in my absence. That realization hit me harder than anything else. They were capable. They just preferred me to carry it. Standing in that damp basement, watching someone else repair the damage, I felt something unexpected. Not rejection, not relief. Clarity. For years, I believed I was holding the family together, that if I loosened my grip, everything would fall apart. But what I was really holding together was an identity built on being indispensable. And as I stood there, hands in my pockets instead of fixing something, I understood something I had avoided for decades. They did not need me the way I thought they did. I had needed them to need me. Without that role, there was a hollow space inside me I did not know how to fill. And for the first time, I was standing in that space without rushing to patch it. There was one final moment where I almost slipped back into who I used to be. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. My parents invited me over for coffee. No crisis, no emergency, just coffee. That alone felt unusual enough to make me uneasy. When I walked into the kitchen, I sensed something rehearsed in the air. My mother had set out pastries. My father sat straighter than usual. Emma was there too, arms folded, watching me carefully. I knew then that this was not casual. My mother began gently. She said they had noticed I seemed different lately. More distant, less involved. She said they missed how things used to be. How things used to be. I let that phrase sit between us. My father cleared his throat. We have always been close, he said. You have always been the one we could count on. There it was again. Not loved. Counted on. Emma chimed in next. She said I seemed cold lately. That I used to care more. That I used to show up without hesitation. I felt the old reflex rise in my chest. The urge to apologize. To explain. To promise I would do better. Instead, I asked a question I had never dared to ask before. When have you ever asked what I needed? The room went still. Not hostile. Just stunned. My mother blinked. We always assumed you were fine. Of course they had. I had built my entire identity around making sure they never saw otherwise. I have spent my whole life trying to be the good son, I said quietly. I thought if I did enough, gave enough, adjusted enough, it would feel different eventually. My voice did not shake. That surprised me. It does not, I continued. I do not feel closer to you. I just feel tired. Emma looked confused, almost defensive. We never asked you to sacrifice anything. And that was the final clarity. They were right. No one had forced me. No one had demanded I shrink my dreams, cancel my plans, or carry every burden. They had simply accepted what I offered. And I had offered everything. I am not angry, I said. I am just done trying to earn something that should not have to be earned. Silence stretched long and uncomfortable. My father looked down at the table. My mother's eyes were glossy, but not with understanding. With discomfort. They did not know how to respond to a version of me that was not steady and self-erasing. I stood up first. Not dramatically. Not in anger. Just finished. I love you, I said. And I meant it. But I cannot keep being this version of myself. For the first time in my life, I walked out of that house without promising to fix anything. And as I drove away, I realized something that felt both painful and freeing. The acceptance I had chased my entire life was never going to come in the way I imagined. Not because I was not enough, but because I had been trying to earn what should have been given freely from the start. The strange thing about stopping is that the world does not end. No lightning strike. No dramatic collapse. No sudden realization from everyone around you. Life just continues. In the months after that conversation, I saw my parents less. Not out of spite. Just because I stopped automatically filling every gap in their lives. When they called, I answered if I could. When they asked for help, I decided based on my capacity, not guilt. At first, the space felt unfamiliar, even lonely. I had built so much of myself around being indispensable that without constant requests, I felt untethered. Who was I if I was not the reliable one? What did I value if not sacrifice? Therapy helped me untangle that. My therapist asked me once, if you were not trying to be a good son, who would you be? I did not have an answer. So I started small. I kept going to my photography class. I planned that solo trip and actually took it. 3 days in a quiet coastal town, walking along the shore at sunrise with no one expecting anything from me. I remember standing on the beach that second morning, cold wind against my face, watching the sky turn orange over the water. There was no one there to impress, no one to assist, no one to anticipate, just me. For the first time, I noticed how quiet my mind felt when it was not calculating someone else's needs. I began saying no without explaining myself in long paragraphs. I let silence exist without rushing to smooth it over. I stopped apologizing for having limits. My relationship with my parents did not transform into something magical. They still see me through the lens they always have. Steady, independent, fine, but I no longer try to bend that lens. The biggest shift did not happen in them. It happened in me. I stopped measuring my worth by how useful I was. I stopped believing love had to be earned through exhaustion. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to build an identity that was not rooted in sacrifice. I still love my family. That has not changed. What has changed is the quiet understanding that my value was never meant to be negotiated through performance. I was enough long before I learned how to be helpful, long before I became the steady one, long before I spent decades trying to be chosen. The acceptance I was chasing my entire life did not come from them. It came the day I looked at myself, without the role, without the obligation, without the constant adjustment, and thought, you do not have to earn your place here. You already have one. And for the first time in my life, that felt like home.